Hello and welcome to Sex in the News. We are the Siegel Brothers. Today we have a couple of stories for you. We're going to start with a little report on how post-menopausal women are reporting that their periods are coming back after getting the COVID vaccine. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how more teen girls graduate from high school when they have access to birth control. And our last story, a little disturbing one. A man at the age of 18 had consensual sex with two other teens, and the state of Montana wants him to remain registered as a sex offender.
Like some 30 years ago.
All right, so our first story, another one of these sort of COVID stories. I know there was something that was making the rounds this week on how COVID might be contributing to sort of prolonged erectile problems in men. Mm-hmm. Well, here we have something for women. Some post-menopausal women have been suffering unexpected periods after receiving a dose of the coronavirus vaccine. Some were post-menopausal, others were premenopausal, but reported that they had very heavy periods following their vaccine. What do you make of that?
Well, it's certainly possible that there are hormonal changes, that this could happen in some women. I don't doubt it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't raise any alarm bells for me. I don't think it would be anything dangerous. Mm-hmm. Just one of those weird kind of side effects, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, right now it's a relatively small number. I think it was maybe 600 or 700 women that were reported. And it is being looked into to see what might be going on there. And that's another one of those, I think, points of warning that something I have to put out there. Just because somebody is looking for something, it doesn't mean it's there. But there is, they don't know if this is a statistical anomaly. But your point is also a very important one. That, getting a vaccine, and it's not just a COVID vaccine, but there have been reports over the years of women experiencing changes to their menstrual flows after other kinds of vaccines as well. People have to understand you're putting something in your body that's not part of your body.
And it's designed to charge up your immune system. Right? Which can cause lots of different kinds of changes.
Exactly, and that's kind of a 1-2 punch. The fact that you're putting something foreign into your body is already going to rile up your immune system, and the fact that what they're putting in is designed to kind of ramp up an immune response, it makes sense. Yeah. It's kind of right along with that, for lack of a better phrase, is this sort of baby monitoring, or actually uterus monitoring functioning that the immune system has, so that even during menstruation, you get these immunological responses. Mm-hmm. So, again, I think you're right on the money with that. This is not something by any indication as yet that needs to be a cause of concern. Right. Use some extra pads. Whatever you need to use, it's going to be temporary. It's just something that has been anecdotally reported by a number of women.
Like those studies I think we mentioned a couple weeks back, and it got a lot of press this past week on all of the late night talk shows. Mm-hmm. Another finding that COVID, the virus itself, apparently is fond of penises as well.
Yes.
And there was some frightening reports about erectile difficulties that men were having even after recovering from a COVID infection.
Yeah.
And I guess the running joke was, why didn't anybody see this a year ago? Because we'd probably get a hell of a lot more guys wearing masks if they were worried about their erections than worrying about other people's risk. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Like with the smoking thing. Tell a guy you better quit smoking or you're going to have a heart attack. He's probably not going to quit smoking.
Not so motivated.
But if you tell a guy you'll risk having erection problems, he'll be motivated to stop smoking. Mm-hmm. Much more likely.
Right. Although, to be honest, most of these anti-mask people anyway probably hadn't gotten it up in years. So, it's a non-starter for them at least.
Right.
But for the rest of you thinking people, just something we want to keep in mind.
And for real old school sexuality educators like us, this next story brings a heartwarming smile, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's one of those validating things, right? We've been talking about this for a long time. I've always loved one of my favorite quotes from, and I just remembered her name actually. I've been blanking on it for so long. Marion Wright Edelman. The woman who charted the
Child Welfare League.
Child Welfare League, yes. One of the greatest quotes of all time. Yes. That in talking about adolescence, the best contraception is hope for a future. And I've gotten so much mileage out of that over the years, but I just absolutely love that. And this is one of those validating studies that have just come out. Right. Basically shows that, again, teen girls who have access to birth control graduate from high school at much higher rates, stay in college at much higher rates, and are allowed to basically have the future that they want to have at much higher rates.
Yeah, and I think this goes deeper below the surface than just what people might obviously think, that girls who have access to birth control are less likely to get pregnant, which would keep them from finishing high school. But this is a lot more than that, isn't it? This is really academic performance, professional aspiration, family values. Yes. This cuts across so many different markers of success.
Right. Life purpose, achievement, and there was a marked difference too, that in general for teen girls across the board, there was a 14% reduction in the number of girls that dropped out of high school. Yet for Hispanic girls, it's 22%.
Wow.
So that was really, really important. So again, it's not, it's not a new concept. I think, again, like you said, a lot of us have been talking about that for a long time. We've sort of known that, but it's nice to have real data to support that.
Yeah.
All right. So again, another good reason to make sure that every woman has access and availability to contraception.
And that every student of every age have access to reality-based, medically accurate sexuality education.
Indeed. Right. For our final story, this is it's kind of a little bizarre one.
This is a weird
it shows
one.
you how mean-spirited I think a lot of Republicans are. And again, here was a guy, Randall Menges, who in 1993, when he was 18 years old, had consensual sex with two other teenage boys at a camp in Idaho. Now, he was charged and jailed.
Right. Now, he was 18. The kids
they were 16.
Playing around with.
But it wasn't an age thing that put him in jail.
Right.
It was that old crimes against nature charge. Those old sodomy laws. Right?
And just in case anybody listening thinks that sodomy is one of those old-fashioned legal via the Bible kind of terms and a euphemism for anal sex.
No.
Right? This old English word called buggery, right? Especially when you look at some of the legal definitions. Sodomy pretty much refers to putting a penis anywhere except in a vagina,
right.
In some states even specify in a missionary position.
Right.
So
That's right.
In some interpretations of these sodomy laws, even rear entry, not anal sex, but doggy style PIV, right? Penis and vagina intercourse, can still be legally argued as sodomy.
That's right. And again, in some states, I remember that was a third-degree felony, just
Right.
a woman being on top.
And how about what they have long called Romeo and Juliet laws?
Yeah.
That if a high school senior who's 18 has a guy who has a girlfriend who's a junior or even a sophomore who's maybe 17 or 16, technically, yes. If he's 18 and she's 15, he's guilty of statutory rape and can be prosecuted. Even the other way around.
Right.
If a girl is 18 and a guy is 15, she is guilty of statutory rape.
Yes.
But these are not cases that are prosecuted. Judges understand, even if a cop has such a hard day or he's such a hard ass, that he's going to actually bust a young couple for making out in a car.
Right.
As soon as they show up before the judge is going to say, this is not a 26-year-old man and a 13-year-old girl. This is like what they would call Romeo and Juliet situations. 18-year-old guy or 16-year-old girl, they're in love, they're teenagers. The law understands usually this distinction. But this was an 18-year-old...
But prosecutors don't.
This was an 18-year-old gay kid.
Yes.
Who happened to have been fooling around with two consensually, but two 16-year-old boys.
Right.
And this took place where? In Idaho.
In Idaho, right. Now, at the time...
20-something years ago.
See, now again, what's important about this is that at the time, those were laws on the books, those crimes against nature. But a lot of people have to remember that, what was it, 2003?
Yes, Lawrence versus Texas.
Right? Yes, when these sodomy laws were ruled unconstitutional. You cannot penalize people for engaging in consensual sex just because it may not be heterosexual.
Or even heterosexual couples. Right?
That's right.
Remember, there was a famous case in Georgia. I don't want to take up too much time, but this was mind-blowing. The police were raiding a crack house or a dealer or something. Big SWAT team, DEA, door-busting things. And they got the address wrong.
Yeah.
They raided the house next door accidentally. And instead of embarrassedly backing out, oh, we're so sorry, oh my God, trying to pick up the pieces of the broken door and back out. Instead, though they barged in the wrong house, they did happen upon a married heterosexual couple who happened to have been having sex on the floor of their living room. And they arrested them under these same kind of laws, right? Imagine getting handcuffed and dragged out of your house for having private sexual activity with your spouse, with your legally married spouse.
Right. So now what I want to emphasize with this case is that all of the police reports in Idaho, where he was arrested in 1993, basically said that it was consensual. However, they had these laws on the books, and he was still charged with one count of a crime against nature.
What does that even mean?
Well, that's that stupid biblical shit.
Yeah,
it really
crime
is.
Against
crime
nature.
Against nature.
I don't remember who said this, but it was a great quote. Somebody once said, the only unnatural sex act is one you can't physically reach.
Right. That's right.
Right?
So, I mean, the law was on the books. He was arrested for it. And he was sentenced...
Because of the law, was sentenced to prison time and mandatory reporting as a sex offender.
Right. So he was sentenced to 5 to 10 years. He served 7 for consensual sex. Right? But again, he was gay. That's really the linchpin of this whole thing. He was released and he moved to Montana.
Which happened to have been one of the states, one of just a handful of single-digit states who have laws that if someone is registered as a sex offender in one state and move to their state, they must immediately register as a sex offender in that state.
Right, exactly.
So when he moved to Montana, he had to register.
He had to register as a sex offender. Right. Now, when these laws were ruled to be unconstitutional, they were supposed to be overturned. And in fact, last Tuesday, a federal judge in Montana ruled that Randall Menges' name should be removed from the state sex offender registry. Right? Now, he's been rejected from jobs. He's lost friends. He's thought many times about committing suicide because of that status. So you can imagine the elation, the relief that he felt when this judge basically said his name needed to be removed. However, and we're going to give a little shout out here to Austin Knudsen, Another one of these sort of Republican Attorney General shitbags. Immediately after that ruling, he appealed. Right? Now, you got to hear what he basically is saying.
This is a 45-year-old man,
Right,
who did something
at 18.
questionable when he was an 18-year-old
I don't even think
kid.
it's questionable. I really don't even give it that that status.
His entire life has been ruined because
Yep.
of this mandatory registry.
Now, what this shitbag governor in Montana basically said was that if his name is removed from the sex offender registry, then it, quote, weakens our state's sex offender registry law, making kids and families less safe. Right?
Wow.
Montana law is clear. If you are a registered sex offender in another state, you must also register here. Right? Now, what a reason to throw somebody's life away. Right? What a reason to continue, because your laws that don't work anyway. Right? And again, let's be clear about that. Sex offender registration has not saved anybody.
Right.
It has not been anywhere near effective, especially what these people do. It just lets them feel better about themselves. That's really all that does. It's warning communities about sexual predators who have been released from prisons. That's what this registry is supposed to do. How is he a threat? How is he a danger to children and families? I mean, it is really so ridiculous. I want to send some good vibes out there to Randall. I'd be surprised if he's choosing to even live among other people anymore. There's really not much of a reason to, but I do hope that all works out. And I hope that I don't know if it's a commutation or just, I hope he gets removed from the sex offender registry, and has a chance to lead something of a normal life. His life has been turned upside down since 1993, and it's just plain wrong.
Yeah.
So for our final segment, we like to finish this show with a piece that we call Poetic Justice.
A little chance to call out some hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm. And we've got a good one this week. Although a little bit different, we have a husband and wife couple. Right? Granted, they're now an ex-husband-wife, but they were married when this was happening. So
why do they deserve our ire this week?
Why do they deserve our ire? Well, we're talking about a U.S. Marshal, right? A deputy U.S. Marshal, who was charged in a bizarre plot, along with his wife, to frame his ex-girlfriend, right, by luring men through ads on Craigslist, basically advertising rape fantasies, domination fantasies, to come to his house with his new wife and basically act out these rape fantasies. Then what they would do is call the police and say that she set this up. Now, they set up a whole bunch of fake websites and social media profiles with his ex-girlfriend's name. And they even said, and using certain phrases that she's known to use. Right? And they used that to advertise on Craigslist primarily, and had these guys come to their home in Anaheim to basically act out these rape fantasies. And then he kind of called the police and accused his ex-girlfriend, he and his wife accused the ex-girlfriend of being responsible for this, sending all of these men to sexually assault her. And she did, I think, 88 days in jail before they dropped the charges, and kind of was able to figure out what was going on. Let's see, the plot worked, right, at least for a while. They staged one or more hoax sexual assaults and attempted assaults, then contacted police to report them that the ex-girlfriend was responsible for hiring the men. And he even, I mean, some of the things that he was even saying when the cops showed up. Remember, he's a U.S. Marshal. Right? And he basically, in some of these police reports, he would tell these police officers that the ex-girlfriend needs to be in fucking handcuffs and in a padded room. I've never seen anything like this in all of my years. And his job is basically protecting federal judges and prosecutors as a U.S. Marshal.
Wow.
So the good news in all of this, actually, I think there's a couple of bits of good news. Number one, Ian and Angela are now divorced. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison for this. He is still awaiting conviction because, let's see, there are a number of charges that he's now faced with. Conspiracy to engage in a cyber-stalking campaign, false reporting, harassment, assault, conspiracy to commit cyber-stalking, and perjury. Right? There's a whole list of these things.
Good.
Right? And again, the ex-girlfriend, I don't want to name her name because she was not part of any of the indictments, even though she kind of was named in the article. But again, look at the suffering at his hands. So for doing that, we would like to acknowledge former U.S. Marshal Deputy Ian and ex-wife Angela Diaz of Anaheim, California, as this week's Poetic Justice. And we give you our traditional salute. And that'll do it for this week's Sex in the Nude.